A few years ago, I had a chance to be in Israel. I've had a chance to be there twice, a real blessing. It's a place like I'd never been before. Well, I can't say that totally. I moved to New Mexico, and when I walked in the deserts of New Mexico, I was getting a little bit of a flavor of what it was like over there. Very unusual country. It's almost all rock, except in certain valleys. Had a real unusual experience while I was there. One of the things that happened to me was we had a small group of all Christians, and somehow, in some way, our tour organizer set us up for our stay in Jerusalem to stay in Central Hotel. Now, Central Hotel is only about 4 or 5 blocks from the old city of Jerusalem. But what makes Central Hotel so unusual is that is the center of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. And very seldom do Christians even go in that area. I mean, these are the ones you see on TV with the black hats and the black coats and the little curls down the side called payot or payas. And they're ultra-Orthodox, just very strong Orthodox. And, of course, Jewish people do not accept Jesus as the Messiah or the Christ. And here we were, a group of Christians who do believe that Jesus is the Messiah or Christ, and we were right in their headquarters. And we stayed there for about 3 days. Very unusual experience. It was a wonderful experience because we learned things and saw things that normally we would not have been able to. But there's an experience that happened one evening that I wanted to share with you. One afternoon, a group of us were kind of standing around in the lobby after we'd made our tours. We were waiting for dinner to be served. And they had 2 different restaurants, by the way, and serving areas. And they fed us in one area, and all their people ate in the other one. But nevertheless, we were waiting for them to get the meal ready, and we were standing around and talking about how miraculous it was that any of us was in Israel. I mean, none of us really had the money to go. There were about 25 of us, I guess, and just really miraculous things had happened that provided us the opportunity to be in Israel, and we were all sharing that. And I stepped away from the group. They were mainly the group that was there. There were a few men standing on the side, and our women, they were sitting on couches, and I walked away to get something to drink. And when I came back, there was this young Orthodox man standing there with his black hat and his curls. And I noticed that the women in our group were all red-faced. And I thought, well, what's going on? And I walked up, and what had happened was, when I moved away from the group, then he came walking over and began attacking. Not physically, but verbally, attacking our group. And they were all flustered. Now, I tell you this story not to tell you how wise I am, but this was one of those situations when I opened my mouth, the Lord just put the right words in there. But here's what happened. As I came walking up, the man suddenly turned around, and he was just red-faced in anger. And he looked at me, and he pointed his finger, and he said, "Your Jesus is a liar. Not only is he a liar, he is a despicable person, and he is not the Messiah." I don't know if you've ever been in a situation when the Lord shuts your mouth and you're not able to say anything. Nothing would come out of my mouth. And I just stood there for a second, listening to him. And then he went on, and when he went on, it helped me to understand why he was so angry. He said, "Because," that was my clue, "in his name, people have killed thousands." And then he stopped. And the first words out of my mouth were, "You're right." And of course, that wasn't what he expected to hear. He had been arguing and attacking the women in our group, and they were trying to defend Jesus and saying, "Oh, don't talk about him that way, he's wonderful," and all these sorts of things, and he was just getting madder and madder. And I said, "You're right." And he looked at me and I said, "In his name, people have done terrible things. They have persecuted, they put people to death. Down through history, Jews have been persecuted by Christians, burned in their synagogues while they were worshiping, their homes raided and families killed." And I said, "It makes me look bad, it makes what I believe look bad, it makes my Messiah look bad, and what's more, I really can't call those people brother because the love of God is not in their hearts." Well, as I said, that wasn't at all what he expected to hear. So he said, well, he's not the Messiah. And I said, "And why do you say that?" See, the word Messiah and the word Christ, we say Jesus Christ. The word Christ is actually Greek for Messiah. It's the same word. It means the anointed one, the one that was chosen by God, the one that was sent to redeem the people, the one that's been sent to lead the people into a new life. And he said he's not the Messiah. And then I said, why do you say that? And he said, because when the Messiah comes, there will be peace. And he looked out and he pointed his finger and just did like that, and he said, and there is no peace. I had to agree with him. I didn't tell him at that moment that I agreed with him, because as I look out in the world, there is no peace in the world. I mean, you just take a look at, watch your evening news, pick up a newspaper. There is no peace in the world. Because you see, this man was thinking about peace the same way everybody else thinks about peace. Peace means you put down your weapons and you don't fight each other. Peace means that you kind of bite your tongue. You don't say what you really think and what you would really like to say, but you don't say it. And therefore, you have at least some kind of a truce where people are not fighting with each other. And the reality is, we don't have that kind of peace in our world. The crime rate, the violence, all the things that are going on in the world, you just don't have that kind of a peace anywhere in this world. And so, to that degree, he was right. Because when the Messiah comes, the promise of God is that there will be peace. And there is no peace. Now, the peace he's looking for, and the kind of peace we're talking about, will come someday, but it comes when Jesus comes back. See, the hard part for them to understand is the same man who came is coming back to finish the job. The very things that the Jewish people are looking for the Messiah to bring are the things that believers, people who believe in Jesus, are talking about that the Messiah will bring when he comes back. When he comes back. In fact, the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, or former mayor, was once asked, do you believe in the Messiah? And he said, oh, yes, I do. And he said, well, what if the Messiah were to come? What would you do? He said, I'd ask him the same question I ask every visitor to Jerusalem. And they said, well, what is that question? He said, I'd look at him and I'd say, is this your first visit or have you been here before? You see, I worship and follow and trust a Jesus who was born Jesus of Nazareth, who came as the Messiah, but who's going to come back to finish the job of Messiah. And the one thing that allows that to happen is the fact that though Jesus was put to death on the cross, he was raised from the dead. The same man continues to live. The same one. The chosen one of God. And because of that resurrection, he can come back and finish the job. But you see, all of those were things that I thought of after this conversation. You know how you always kind of think after a conversation, you think, I should have said this, or I should have said that, you know. And it was after the conversation that I happened to think about all these things. But see, at the time, what struck me was this man's idea of peace was just like everybody else's idea of peace. And that is, if we're not fighting, then there's bound to be peace. But your life could still be in turmoil. You know, it's really interesting. Jesus made a statement once to his disciples. They were all upset because he was talking about leaving them. And he said, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give you. I give you a different kind of peace. Because the world's idea of peace is we're not fighting. But you know what Jesus' idea of peace is? Jesus' idea of peace is a sense of well-being within your life. A sense of well-being in your relationships. A sense of well-being about who you are and about the way your life is being lived. It's characterized by the Hebrew word shalom. And the word shalom doesn't mean just peace like we're not fighting, but it means peace in that your relationship with me and my relationship with you is in good standing. It's in good shape. We get along. It's more than just what's happening on the outside. It's what's happening on the inside. And that's what made it so unusual, because when I opened my mouth to respond to this man, the words that came out, and I don't even know if I was even thinking the words, but the words that came out were this. When he said, there is no peace. He is not the Messiah, because when the Messiah comes, there will be peace, and there is no peace. And my answer was, oh, but there is. But it's not out there. It's in here. And I stood looking at this man who was a total stranger, and I said, I have such love for this city, for this land, for you, because of my Messiah. The difference He has made in me has given me peace. There is peace, but the peace is inside right now, not outside. Eventually it's going to be outside. Eventually it's going to be throughout the whole world when He returns. But right now, the peace that He promises is a peace that's inside. That's why He said, my peace I give to you, not like the world gives. Because the world can only cause you to put down your weapons. It can't change your attitude. It can't change your mind. It can't change the way you feel about things. You know, you've heard the expression, you can't legislate morality. And that's true and false, because every law is somebody's idea of morality. But what they're saying is, you cannot pass a law and change people's hearts. You can't pass a law and change people's minds. You can change their behavior, but you can't change the way they feel about things. That's why when Jesus was talking about peace, He wasn't talking about just affecting people's behavior. He was talking about changing their lives and affecting the way they are inside. See, when God's peace, and by the way, Jesus, one of the titles for Him, back in one of the prophets that lived almost 800 years before the time of Jesus, talked about what the Messiah would be like when He came. And He said one of the titles going to be given to Him was going to be Sar Shalom, which means the Prince of Peace, or the ruler of peace. He will be the one who brings the peace. And see, God's peace starts out on the inside, and then it affects the outside. Because I can't be at peace with you in the way I'm supposed to be. I can't even be at peace with myself if I'm not first at peace with God. And when I'm at peace with God, then that affects my ability to be at peace with you. And then if I'm at peace with you, that allows me to be at peace with others as well. You see, it's all connected, and it all has to do not with just the way I act on the outside, but it has to do with the way that I feel on the inside. That's why Jesus came to bring God's kind of peace to the world. Now, what are the effects of that kind of peace in our lives? Number one, when I'm at peace with God, and I've got a good relationship there, then I'm going to be at peace with other people. Because I'm not going to be so centered on myself. I'm not going to be thinking about what I want all the time. I'm not going to be thinking about what makes me feel good or what hurts me. I'm going to be at peace, and therefore when things don't always go the way that I want, it's not going to upset me so much. I'll be able to deal with it. But see, if I'm not at peace with God, then every little thing that comes down the pike is going to just blow my world wide open. And I'm going to be irritated and disgusted and angry and frustrated all the time. Because you see, peace does a real strange thing. Peace gives me the ability to face difficulties without being bowled over. Peace gives me the strength to be able to stand when other people are falling down. I want to illustrate this. Some of you may have heard the armor of God that Paul talks about in his letter to the Ephesians. He says, put on the armor of God. And one of the pieces of armor are sandals. And the weird part about these sandals is it says the sandals of the preparation of the gospel of peace. And you think, what does that mean? Well, it's this. Paul was talking about the Roman war sandals. And the Roman war sandals, we now know from not only from history, but also from archaeology, the Roman war sandals were the sandals that the soldiers wore. They had lacing up the front. They had a shin guard to protect their shins from attack and from injury. But they also had spikes on the bottom, anywhere from 1 to 3 inches long. And the purpose of those spikes was twofold. Number one, if your enemy fell, it was a good weapon. You know, that's all you had to do, and that pretty well took care of an enemy, because it was like daggers in the bottom of your feet. But more importantly, they could dig their feet in and plant their feet solid so that if an enemy came rushing against them, they were firmly planted and they could not be knocked off balance very easily. It gave them an advantage. And see, that's what God's peace does. God's peace allows us to firmly plant, and when bad things happen, as they will to every single person who lives, nobody goes through life without having bad things happen to them. But when those things happen, when you're planted in God's peace, then your feet are firmly planted on the ground, and when it hits you, it doesn't knock you off balance. It doesn't knock you over. You're able to continue standing. And that's why Jesus said, you need my kind of peace, not just the world's kind of peace. You need my kind of peace in your life. The kind of peace that causes a husband and a wife to have a good relationship. The kind of peace that causes a brother and sister not to be arguing all the time. The kind of peace that allows you to work in a job that may not be the best job around, and it may not be the happiest job, but you are secure in it, and you can do what needs to be done, even though your supervisor or whoever it may be on your back. It's all right, because you're at peace within yourself, and you can deal with situations like that. That's what God's peace does. And the thing is, it's not something we can just decide one morning, okay, I think I'll have God's peace today. It doesn't work that way. You see, Jesus said, my peace I give to you. In other words, it's a kind of peace that can only be received as a gift. It's not something that can be earned. It's not something that can be just decided on. It is a gift from God. And it comes with being in a good relationship with God. That's where the peace comes from. And out of that peace comes joy and all sorts of things. But it can only be received as a gift from God. That's why I think they call Jesus the Prince of Peace. Because he came to give that gift of peace. To put our relationships in a proper order. To put them where they need to be. In fact, Paul says that it was through the Christ, through the Messiah, that God was reconciling the world to himself. And all that means is this. There was a relationship that God had meant for man to live in. Man had blown that relationship, and God was making it possible for that relationship to happen all over again. For man to know God in love and in peace, and to be in a right relationship with his Father. That through Jesus, God was bringing his peace into the world. Now, I don't know where you stand in your relationship with God. I know this week we had an opportunity of teaching those children about what it means to trust God, because you see, that's the source of peace. If I'm trusting that God's in charge, and if I'm trusting that God knows what's best, and if I'm trusting that God knows what's best for me, then I'm at peace. Have you ever faced a problem when it needed a professional and there wasn't a professional around, and you're pulling your hair and you're like, what am I going to do? I don't know how to solve this problem. And all of a sudden an expert shows up and says, oh, I know how to deal with that. And you breathe a sigh of relief. Thank goodness somebody's here who knows what to do. That's the way it is with God. How do you solve the problems of your life? Boy, I can't give you answers. How can you solve the difficulties that you face? I don't know. I face difficulties too. But I do know the one who does know. And the one who knows is the expert. He made life, and he knows best how to deal with it. And when I can trust him, then I have peace. I have peace in my life. God wants all of us to know that peace. He did not make us to live our lives in turmoil. He wants us all to know that peace within. Now, just because a person says, well, I'm a Christian, that doesn't mean you automatically have peace. Because peace is something you have to let happen in your life. It doesn't just automatically come with the territory. Because I can choose to be upset about things, and I can choose to try to do things my own way, and I'm still not going to have peace. It's when I learn that I can trust God, and I can depend on him, and that I can rely on his judgment and his leading of my life, that's when real peace comes. I want to say at the end of the story that we talked for a few moments longer, this Jewish man and I. And when we finished, this man that had been so angry stuck out his hand, and there was a big smile that came across his face, and he said to me, Shalom, peace. And I knew that that man had seen Christianity and Jesus in a way he had never seen him before. Because he learned then that Jesus makes the difference in a life. Jesus lights the way. He lights the way to peace because he is the Prince of Peace. As I said a minute ago, as we close our service, I don't know where you stand with the Lord. You may have a wonderful relationship with him. You may trust him completely. And I hope that you do. But if you don't, you're missing out on the greatest gift that He could give us. A lot of people think that the great thing that God wants us to have is to go to heaven. Well, that may be true, but that's not why we're living on this earth. He wants us to have His peace. And He wants us to be able to live in peace with Him and with each other. And the only way that can happen is if we say yes to what He has to offer. He offers His presence. He offers His grace and His love. Jesus made it possible because He paid for the sin that was the barrier that kept that peace from happening. So that all we had to do is say, I want to believe You, and I want to trust You, and I want to let You do in me what You want to do in me and through me. I'm going to simply give you this little invitation as we get ready to close. If you want to talk about how you get that kind of peace in your life, I'd love to talk with you. There may be another minister that you feel close to that you feel you need to talk to. That's fine. It doesn't really matter to me who's the person that you talk it over with. The important thing is that you take it seriously enough that you try to find out, how can I get that kind of peace in my life? That's the important thing. And if you need someone to talk to, then I'm here. I'm available. There are others too. But I'd be glad to talk with you about how you can have that kind of peace within your life. You may have been in churches where the altar was open. Well, this altar is always open. But it doesn't take an altar. It takes a heart willing to say, God, I need Your peace in my life. I don't have it. I want it in me. I want it in me.